I knew something was wrong the moment I saw the way she looked at me, but I didn't realize that look would be the beginning of everything that shattered my heart and opened my eyes to the truth I never wanted to see. And as I sit here now retelling it, I can still feel the sting of that moment like a fresh wound that refuses to heal because betrayal doesn't just cut you once. It keeps cutting every time you remember. My name is Adrian, and a year ago, I truly believed I had found the woman I would spend my life with. The woman who would stand by me through every storm, never knowing that she was the very storm I was trying to survive. And the only reason I found out was because of a testimony I never imagined I would have to create. I run a successful tech company, but I never liked to brag about it. And most people didn't know how much I had or how quickly my life had changed. But she did, or at least she thought she did, because she met me during a launch party, surrounded by wealth, flashing cameras, and investors who never stopped talking. And from the very first moment she smiled at me, I thought maybe, just maybe, someone finally saw me for who I was and not for the money people assumed I had. Her name was Lila, and everything about her seemed perfect. Soft voice, warm laugh, bright eyes that made you feel seen in a crowded room. But time has taught me that beauty can be the most dangerous disguise of all, especially when it hides a heart that only beats for what it wants to take. For months, everything felt like a dream, and when I proposed, the way she threw her arms around me made believe I had found the one person who loved me without condition. But love is loud, and lies are louder. And when a friend told me he overheard her bragging about her future lifestyle upgrade, something twisted inside me. I didn't want to believe him, so I did something drastic, something reckless. I pretended I was broke. I told her my business was collapsing. Investors were pulling out, and I might lose everything, expecting fear, worry, maybe even support. But what I got instead was a coldness I had never seen before. A sharp shift so sudden it left me frozen, and that was the moment everything truly began. The first sign that her love was already slipping came the moment I finished telling her about the collapse. Because instead of reaching for my hand or even asking if I was okay, she just stared at me with this blank expression like she was calculating something in her head, and when she finally spoke, her words felt like a knife dipped in ice saying, "Well, I guess things happen," as if my entire world falling apart was nothing more than a minor inconvenience that interrupted her dinner plans. I remember sitting there in our living room, the soft glow of the lamp barely illuminating her face, shadows dancing behind her like silent warnings I was too blind to see earlier. And I kept waiting for her to show some spark of empathy, some sign that she cared about me beyond the money I had pretended to lose. But instead, she kept asking questions about my health, not about my stress, not about how I felt, but about what the collapse meant for our future wedding, our house. The honeymoon she had been planning in luxury resorts, she never bothered to ask if I even liked. "So, does this mean we need to postpone everything?" She asked, her voice sharp, almost annoyed, and when I said yes, her lips tightened, her jaw clenched, and she looked away like she couldn't stand to even look at me anymore. I tried to stay calm, hoping maybe she was just shocked. But the days that followed only proved the truth I had hoped wasn't real, because she started staying out late, claiming she was with friends, yet her phone suddenly stayed face down, locked, silent, and she barely touched me or spoke to me unless it was to complain about something. One evening, I heard her on the phone in the hallway, whispering urgently, saying, "I can't be stuck with someone who has nothing." And those words hit me so hard, I had to steady myself against the wall just to breathe. The realization spreading through me like poison. She wasn't sad. She wasn't worried. She was planning her exit. But I needed proof, real proof, and as painful as it was, I forced myself to keep the act going, pretending I didn't hear her late-night calls. pretending I didn't notice her coldness, her distance, her disappointment, because deep down I already knew the truth, yet my heart still hoped to be wrong. Still prayed that maybe someday she'd look at me with love again instead of resentment. But instead things only got worse, far worse. And the truth that finally came out was darker than anything I had prepared myself for. I realized just how far things had fallen one night when she came home dressed in a shimmering gold dress I had never seen before. Her hair perfectly done, perfume so strong it filled the entire doorway. And when I asked where she had been, she didn't even bother to hide her irritation as she snapped, "Why do you care? It's not like you can take me anywhere anymore." And those words hung in the air like smoke from a fire I didn't start, but was being forced to choke on. She walked past me without waiting for a response, tossed her clutch on the couch, and scrolled through her phone with this distant smirk that made my stomach twist because it was a look I had never seen before. A look that didn't belong to the woman I thought I knew. And before I could stop myself, I asked, "Are you seeing someone else?" The way she froze told me everything. Her shoulders stiffened. Her fingers tightened around her phone, and for a brief second, something like fear flickered across her face before she masked it with annoyance and said, "Don't be ridiculous," but her voice trembled. Just enough for me to hear the truth she wouldn't say out loud. That night, after she fell asleep, I sat in the kitchen with the lights off, staring at the reflection of the refrigerator door, trying to convince myself not to check her phone. But desperation makes you do things you never imagined. And when I finally opened to sing the same passcode she once told me with a laugh, I felt my chest tighten so hard. I thought I might collapse. Dozens of messages filled the screen, all from someone named R, and the conversations were full of plans, flirtation, and worst of all, complaints about me, mocking my bad luck, calling me dead weight, and saying she deserved someone who could actually give her the life she wanted. I sat there reading everything, each sentence cutting deeper, and by the time I reached the part where she said she might leave me soon, my hands were shaking so badly I had to set the phone down before I dropped it. But instead of confronting her, instead of screaming or crying, I wiped my face, breathed slowly, and decided that if she wanted to see broke Adrian, then she would see him to the very end, because this test wasn't over yet. And if she was willing to betray me this easily, I needed to know exactly how far she would go before the truth destroyed whatever was left between us. The next morning, I woke up before her and just watched her sleeping, wondering how many of the moments that once felt real were actually lies disguised as love. And it was strange because instead of anger, I felt this numb heaviness in my chest, like my heart had finally grown tired of being hopeful. And in that moment, I understood that the man she thought she was fooling didn't exist anymore. The real me was done pretending everything was fine. When she opened her eyes and saw me sitting on the edge of the bed, she frowned like my presence annoyed her, and she mumbled, "Why are you staring at me like that?" in a tone that made it easier to continue the act than to expose the truth I had discovered only hours earlier. So I smiled gently and said, "Just thinking about what we're going to do next," pretending to be uncertain, embarrassed and anxious, the way she expected a broke man to feel. And immediately I saw her perk up, not out of compassion but opportunity. She asked if I had contacted any friends for help, hinted that maybe my parents could do something, and even suggested I sell my car. Her voice rising with impatience every time I told her I didn't want to accept help or rush into anything. Later that afternoon, she suggested we meet at a cafe near the city center, saying she wanted to talk. But I could hear the cold finality in her voice as if she had already made up her mind about whatever came next. I followed her there, watching how her eyes darted around the room like she was expecting someone else to show up. And when she finally sat down across from me, she sighed dramatically and began with, "Adrian, We need to be realistic. The same phrase people use when they're about to break something that still believes it can be fixed. She told me she needed stability, that she couldn't live like this, that she deserved better, and every sentence felt rehearsed, as if she had practiced it in the mirror before leaving the house. I listened quietly, letting her words wash over me, letting her reveal who she really was without interruption. And then she delivered the final blow, saying, maybe we rushed into this. Maybe we should take a break. Her eyes avoiding mine because even she knew how cruel that sounded. I nodded slowly, pretending to be crushed, pretending not to notice her relief. Because this was the moment I needed, the moment she chose money over me, and now I was fully ready for the truth to unfold in a way she would never see coming. When we left the cafe, she walked ahead of me with quick, impatient steps, like she couldn't wait to put distance between us, and I stayed a few paces behind, watching the woman I once planned to marry suddenly become a stranger who couldn't bear to be seen beside a man she thought had nothing left to give. And the saddest part was how natural it seemed to her. She didn't look back, didn't ask if I was okay, didn't even pretend to care, and when we reached the parking lot, she gave me a half-hearted smile that didn't reach her eyes and said, "I'll call you later," even though we both knew she wouldn't. I stood there long after she drove away, letting the wind cut through my jacket as I tried to collect the scattered pieces of what was once my life. And for a moment I questioned if I had gone too far. This test was breaking me more than her betrayal ever could, but then I remembered the messages. The mocking laughter, the way she called me dead weight, and suddenly the pain hardened into a quiet, burning determination. I wasn't done. Not yet. That night, I called my cousin Daniel, one of the only people who knew the truth, and told him everything, every word she said, every plan she hinted at, and he didn't hesitate before saying, "Then it's time to end the game, but on your terms." Together, we planned the final step, the moment where the facade of being broke would crumble and expose everything she tried so desperately to hide. The next day, I sent Lila a simple message. "Can we meet tonight? I need to talk to you." I expected her to ignore it, but she replied almost instantly with a cold, "Fine," followed by a location or apartment, like she didn't want to be seen with me anywhere public. When I arrived, she barely opened the door before turning away, her arms crossed, her face tense with annoyance, and she asked, "What now, Adrian?" I thought we already talked. I nodded slowly and walked inside, feeling her impatience like a weight pressing against my back, and I said, "You're right. We did talk, but there's something you still don't know." She rolled her eyes, muttering something under her breath, and that small gesture so dismissive, so entitled was the final confirmation I needed. Tonight, everything would change, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me as I prepared to reveal a truth she never expected to face. She stood there in her living room with her arms folded tightly, tapping her fingers against her elbow like every second she spent with me was a burden she couldn't wait to drop. And I remember looking at her and thinking how strange it was that someone I once trusted with every part of my heart now felt like a complete stranger, who couldn't even pretend to hide her disappointment anymore. I took a slow breath, forcing my voice to stay calm as I said, "Lila, before anything else, I need you to tell me something honestly." And she let out this exaggerated sigh, rolling her eyes before replying, "What is it now, Adrian?" Her tone was sharp, impatient, as if she was scolding a child, not talking to the man she once claimed to love. And that alone told me she had already mentally checked out of our relationship long before I ever tested her. I stepped closer and asked quietly, "If I never got my money back, if I stayed like this, would you still want to marry me?" And watching her freeze for a fraction of a second was like watching a mask slip, revealing everything she'd tried to hide. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked away, her jaw tightening, her eyes flicking toward the window as if searching for an escape. And finally she said, "Adrian, you're being unrealistic. Love doesn't pay bills. I need someone stable, someone who can take care of things." Every word felt like a crack forming in the floor beneath me, and even though I already knew the truth, hearing it out loud, hearing her admit that without money I meant nothing to her was a pain I wasn't prepared for. I swallowed hard and said, "So, you wouldn't stay?" And she shrugged one shoulder, barely even trying to soften the blow as she murmured, "I can't be with someone who drags me down. I'm sorry, but I can't live this kind of life." And there it was, the final, undeniable truth. I nodded slowly, pretending to accept her words, pretending to let them sink in like they shattered me completely. But inside, something shifted, something quiet and resolute, because I realized I was no longer the one being tested. She was, and she'd already failed long before this conversation even started. So I looked at her with a calmness she didn't expect and said softly, "Thank you for being honest." And for the first time that night, she looked confused, almost worried, because she had no idea what was coming next. I let a long silence fill the room, letting her discomfort simmer, because for once she wasn't in control of the moment. And after a few seconds, she finally asked, "What's that supposed to mean?" Her voice slightly shaky, betraying the confidence she had tried so hard to hold on to. I walked past her and sat on the edge of the couch, my hands clasped together, my breath steady, and I said, "Lila, there's something I haven't told you. Something important," watching as her eyes narrowed, suspicion flickering across her face, like she feared the truth but wanted it anyway. She slowly lowered herself onto the chair across from me, crossing her legs, flipping her hair, trying to regain that careless superiority she always carried lately, and she smirked as she said, "What now? Another problem? Another crisis?" That smirk so smug, so confident that she had the upper hand made what I was about to do feel not just necessary, but ripe. I looked her straight in the eyes and said, "I'm not broke." The words hung between us like thunder, and for a moment she didn't react at all. It was as if her brain froze, trying to process something she hadn't even considered possible. Then her brows pulled together, her lips parted slightly, and she laughed at us short, nervous laugh as she said, "What do you mean you're not broke?" "You said," I cut her off gently. I lied. I needed to see something. I needed to know if you loved me, or the life you thought I could give you. Her smile collapsed instantly, replaced by panic, her eyes widening as she leaned forward, whispering, "Adrian, why would you do that? Why would you test me like that?" But I didn't let her twist it. "Not this time. Because something felt wrong," I said softly. "Because I heard things. Because you changed the moment you thought the money was gone. And I needed to see who you really were." She swallowed hard, her breath quickening, guilt and fear mixing across her face as she whispered, "Adrian, I was just scared. You blindsided me. Anyone would react like that." But I shook my head. "No, not like that. Not by running to someone else. Not by calling me dead weight. Not by planning your escape." Her face drained of color, her lips trembling as she whispered, You saw my messages?" And in that instant, everything she had been hiding lay exposed, fragile and ugly. It was the first time I saw her afraid not of losing money, but of losing me, and that fear came far too late. The moment I nodded, confirming that I had seen every message she thought she had so cleverly hidden, her entire body seemed to collapse inward, her confidence draining like water through open fingers as she whispered, "Adrian, please." It wasn't what it looked like, but even as she said the words, her voice trembled with the kind of desperation that comes only when someone realizes their power has slipped away completely. She moved toward me slowly, cautiously, as if afraid I might vanish if she didn't approach carefully. and she reached for my hand with shaking fingers. But I pulled it back before she could touch me, watching the way her face fell. The way her breath caught in her throat as she realized the shift she never expected had finally hit her. "I can explain," she tried again, her voice cracking, and I almost laughed at it out of humor. But out of disbelief, in case she had spent weeks watching me struggle, mocking me, distancing herself, planning her escape, and only now, when the truth threatened the lifestyle she dreamed of, did she suddenly rediscover her emotions. She knelt in front of me, something I never imagined she would do, her eyes brimming with tears that felt too perfectly timed, too conveniently placed, and she said, "I was scared, okay? I thought you were giving up. I thought you weren't strong enough. I made a mistake. But I love you, Adrian. I do." Her voice softened, dripping with calculated warmth, her hands shaking as she reached out again, but I stepped back, forcing distance between us as I said, "You don't love me. You loved what I could give you. And when you thought that was gone, so was your love." She opened her mouth, but no sound came out, and for the first time, she seemed genuinely speechless, her carefully crafted persona cracking like thin glass beneath too much pressure. "Who is R?" I asked quietly, and she froze completely, tears halting mid-fall, her breath stuttering as she realized the lies she'd been preparing wouldn't work anymore. "He's no one," she whispered, but the lie was weak, brittle, and she knew it. I shook my head, my voice steady as I replied, "He was someone when you were planning a new life with him. He was someone when you called me dead weight." She crumpled then, sinking to the floor as silent sobs shook her shoulders, but even as I watched her fall apart, there was no satisfaction and only clarity, cold and sharp, reminding me that this moment was the true end of everything we once were or pretended to be. I stood there watching her fall apart on the floor, her sobs echoing against the walls of the apartment she once imagined filling with a lifestyle built on my success. And for a moment, I wondered if any part of what we had was ever real, or if the whole relationship was just a beautifully wrapped illusion hiding intentions I was too blind to see. She tried crawling closer, her voice cracking as she whispered, "Adrian, please don't do this. I can fix it. I can be better." But her words felt hollow, rehearsed, the kind of desperate promises people make only when they realize they're about to lose something they never truly valued in the first place. I took a step back, needing space, needing clarity, and said calmly, "Lila, love doesn't disappear when money does. Love doesn't look for the nearest exit when life gets heavy. And whatever this was, it wasn't love." She shook her head violently, tears streaking her face, mascara smudging like dark bruises beneath her eyes, and she screamed, "You tricked me. You made me think you were broke. You pushed me into reacting this way." Her voice cracked with anger now, not sadness, revealing the truth beneath the performance. She wasn't heartbroken over losing Mesh, was furious that her plan had fallen apart. I let her finish before I replied quietly, "If pretending to be broke was enough to make you leave, then you were never staying to begin with." Her sobs slowed then, her breathing uneven as she stared at me with a mixture of hatred and desperation, and she whispered, "So what now? You're just going to walk away after everything?" I nodded, the decision heavy but necessary, and said, "Yes, I am." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the ringgits, a symbol of trust and forever now, just a cold reminder of what I had almost given to the wrong person. I set it gently on the table, and she stared at it like it was slipping through her fingers, even though she never held it with real love to begin with. "Goodbye, Lila," I said quietly, and I turned toward the door, each step feeling like a release, a breaking of chains I didn't realize had been tightening around me for months. As I reached the doorway, she screamed after me, her voice raw and furious, "You'll regret this. You'll never find someone like me. And without turning back, I whispered to myself, that's the point. Before stepping out into the hallway and closing the door on her, on us, on everything. She pretended to be. Walking away from her apartment felt like stepping out of a storm I didn't even know I had been trapped in. And as the cold night air hit my face, I finally took the first deep breath I'd taken in months, feeling something inside me loosen, unravel, and fall away like the last thread of a life I no longer wanted to cling to. I didn't go home right away. Instead, I drove aimlessly through the quiet streets, the city lights blurring past as my mind replayed every moment of our relationship, every smile, every lie, every shift in her tone that I once wrote off as stress or tiredness, but now realized were warnings I ignored. And yet, beneath all the exhaustion and hurt, there was a strange sense of gratitude not for her betrayal, but for the truth it revealed, for the way it forced me to confront the parts of myself that trusted too quickly, hoped too blindly, and loved without questioning. When I finally reached my place, Daniel was waiting outside, leaning against his car with 2 cups of coffee, and the moment he saw my face, he didn't ask what happened. He just handed me a cup and said, "It's over, isn't it?" I nodded, and we sat on the hood of his car in silence for a while, looking up at the sky like 2 kids trying to make sense of a world that didn't always play fair. "You did the right thing," he said eventually. "Better to find out now than 10 years into a marriage built on lies." His words hit me with quiet truth, and for the first time since everything started, I felt a flicker of peace warming the cold edges of my chest. The next morning, I returned to my real-life Eve Lila thought had disappeared meeting with my team, reconnecting with partners, stepping back into the position I had temporarily walked away from to see what she truly valued. And as I moved through the day, I realized something important. Losing someone who never loved me was not a loss at all, it was freedom. A second chance to build a future with someone who would choose me for who I am, not for the weight of my bank account. Weeks passed and Lila tried calling, texting, even showing up once, but I never answered, because some doors are meant to stay closed once you learn what's on the other side. And though the pain lingered, it eventually soft turning into wisdom I carried quietly in my chest, reminding me that true love doesn't crumble under pressure, doesn't shift with fortune, doesn't vanish when life stops being easy. True love stays. True love stands firm. And someday I knew I would find someone who loved me the way I once loved the idea of earning it for money. Not for status, but for the man I am when everything else is stripped away.